So
It's all
I'm Kara
yours.
Schuttler. Thank you. I'm Kara Schuttler. I'm Triway's Technology Integration Specialist. Obviously, with COVID, things have looked a little bit different this year. Wasn't able to get in classrooms like I typically do. And I think everyone just felt better keeping their doors shut and people to themselves. So this feels a little strange, kind of working with teachers in this way again. But what we're going to be working on today is a Google slide, a use for Google Slides that isn't your typical presentation. I have a message to share type thing for students. The link to the resource document should be in the chat now. So if you want to go ahead and access that, everything that we do today is, or that you're going to see today, is included in that document. And if you have any questions, either send them in the chat, or I did include my email address in the document, so you can feel free to email me if you have any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then just go from there. All right. So hopefully you're seeing my choose your own adventure using Google Slides resource document. I see the anonymous icons showing up there across the top. If at any point you need me to stop and you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and shout out if you need to. But really, this application for Google Slides is incredibly flexible. You can do so many different things with it. I'm going to show you some authentic examples of how it's been used from students that I've worked with, also a way that I used it for my staff here at Triway, and just another example that I've seen used, but I've not actually done. I haven't had a sample sent to me yet, so I created a little mini sample for you. So the way I always presented this to my students when I was in the 5th grade classroom was, how many times have you watched a movie and, you know, usually it's in a scary movie. You're like, no, don't go down that aisle. Why would you go down that hallway? And they go down the hallway and horrible things happen. Or have you read a book and just, you know, asked yourself, like, what could the author have done differently to make the ending better? Or maybe you feel a character should have, you know, chosen this person instead of that person for whatever reason. The choose your own adventure using Google Slides really does allow the writer to make the story, and it allows the reader to choose what they would choose if they were in the character's shoes. So this is a great way to teach point of view. It's a great way to talk about cause and effect. If I do this, then this is going to happen. It also allows students that choice. So I may not be able to show you what I know using a regular piece of paper, but I can do a digital diagram and I can show you what I know, you know, for example, using the frog dissection that we'll see here in a bit. Maybe I'm not the best writer, but I can really show you using graphics. So we're going to look through a couple of examples of how this has been used, and then I'll show you actually how to do it. So in the resource document that you have in front of you, the first thing I have is a Google lesson plan. So Google actually does have this listed as an activity that you can do. They call it the if-then adventure stories. So if you're one of those people that really need a lesson plan to follow, and you know you're trying to be very scripted, this would be what you'd probably want to go to. Now, it does have it listed as a middle and high school activity. I've done this with as young as 3rd grade. Obviously, the outcome will be different based on the level of students that you're working with, but really anyone can participate in this. If you scroll down, it does show different learning objectives. Now, one thing I will say, if I scroll down a little bit longer, a little bit farther, where it says materials. So our district has our student account set up where they cannot receive information at a certain grade level from someone who is not within our domain. So anyone without a triway.us account cannot send or share information with our triway.us account students. So because of that, it did cause a little bit of trouble getting some of the documents from Google. So what I actually did is I downloaded them and made a copy of them and then posted them in Google Classroom. That way students could access them through the Google Classroom that I set up. And then the videos, because they weren't able to access those, they weren't able to be shared with them, I just shared on a projector. Watch them, we could talk about them, I could pause them, and we did them together. But this specific lesson plan really is a walkthrough. So first we're going to do this. We're going to spend 15 minutes doing the overview and the introduction. There's a little video, there's someone that comes on the screen and talks about what you're going to be doing. So again, if you want to do this as more of a whole group, we sit down, we learn this together activity, the lesson plan that's given here is really, really nice. If you're more of a, I got this, I can do this myself, I want to make it my own, by all means do that. So that is the lesson plan for the if-then story. Things. And another resource that he has posted, and he is so generous with his sharing, is on his website, which is the controlaltachieve.com. And if you go to resources, then click on Google Slides, we're going to go down and look right here where it says interactive presentations with Google Slides. And he's got a bunch of different resources and activities that you can sample, that you can copy, use your own. And we're going to actually look at one of his as a more advanced example of how to use the Choose Your Own Adventure. Has Google Slides, but the one that we'll be looking at are the interactive presentations. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start looking at some of these examples so that you can actually see what Choose Your Own Adventure, how it can be used. I know a lot of people think of this as a language arts activity, but it isn't necessarily only for language arts. I've seen science classrooms use it. I've seen history classes use it. I've personally used it for a how-to manual. We all know that Android and Apple devices are very different when you're doing things with them. So we made a small little short how-to, and the first slide was, do you have an Apple device or do you have an Android device? And then you click on that and it takes you in different places. So we're going to look at the first example, which is going to be the beginner example of the Choose Your Own Adventure. This was done, I believe it was third or fourth grade classrooms. And the prompt that they were given was, I want you to, we did this around Thanksgiving. I wanted to put them in a situation where they were a turkey and they were trying to avoid being Thanksgiving dinner. So this particular group, I had this group working in pairs. They wrote a story called Eat More Tofu. So from this slide, you just click and it gets you right into the story. Again, these were, I think, third or fourth grade students at the time. So again, the outcome depends on the level of student that you're working with. So they started their story, you've lived on a farm your whole life. So they're actually talking to their reader like the reader is the turkey. When November comes around, you, the 5-year-old turkey, know it's time for Thanksgiving. You are the oldest and largest turkey on the farm, so you know you're the first to go. It's just 3 days before Thanksgiving. When Farmer John comes to the barn, and here comes your first choice. Do you choose to run for your life, or do you choose to hide in the haystack? Now you'll notice when my little mouse points over that it turns to the finger, because those are the hyperlinks that's going to take us to the next place in the Google slideshow. So let's choose to hide in the haystack. Click on that. You'll notice the next slide tells me what my decision was. So I chose to hide in a haystack. Farmer John didn't see you in the haystack, so then he walked out of the barn. You think you're safe, but then suddenly you hear a noise. You turn to see, do we see little Jack or do we turn to see Farmer John? So again, these are my two choices. We'll say little Jack. You see little Jack. You were surprised to see little Jack out here this late at night. Is Jack awake? So you get to choose. Do you choose to peck him, or do you choose to leave him alone? Well, if I'm a turkey and I'm going to be eaten for dinner, I will probably choose to peck him. And as we all know, those Choose Your Own Adventure stories sometimes end very quickly. So I chose to peck him. Why? you might want to think about the outcome next time. So they didn't exactly tell us that we ended up being eaten for dinner, but based on how that's worded, we can infer that we were eaten for dinner that night. So on the end of all of the slides, it does have a restart button, and that will take us back to the beginning so that you can start the story again. So that was just a quick example of the beginner level of the Choose Your Own Adventure. Based on the slide that you see in front of you now, you can see all of the different choices that this group made. So you can see those are all the ending slides. Those are where your story ends. But we have quite the selection there. They must have these congrats whenever you somehow escape from being eaten by the farmer's family. So we'll look at the next example, which is going to be a more intermediate level example of how to use the Choose Your Own Adventure. This one was in a history class. I believe it was 6th or 7th grade history, social studies. They were doing an Egypt unit. And instead of really focusing on the writing part of this, and I think this would be a great collaborative activity for like a language arts and a social studies class, this teacher chose to make it more about the content that the students had learned during their Egypt unit. So while an ELA teacher may focus on, you need to have 5 characters, you need to have the plot, you need to have at least, so many examples of cause and effect or something like that, this teacher required use of the vocabulary words appropriately that they had learned during their Egypt unit. So we'll see that here in just a sec. So this group wasn't focused so much on what the story looked like, but more the content. So they have their title slide, which gives the title and the authors. And again, they go straight into their story. So this time you're not a turkey, you're a 12-year-old kid and you're living in Egypt. So you're hiding behind a mound of sand, spying on archaeologists who have entered I'm not going to try to pronounce that, Hatshepsut's pyramid, but obviously that's a person that they had studied, and talking about how this person evolves in the story could be part of what they learned. So the teacher can then evaluate their learning based on how they use the person in the story. She was known for being a great ruler who reigned in 1472. After he leaves, you decide to enter the pyramid and explore. When you enter, you see 2 dark hallways that go to the left and to the right. Do you? So now the reader gets to choose. Do we go to the left or do we go to the right? So this time we're going to go to the left. Beginning next slide always tells the reader what their choice was. And you'll see why we do that whenever we actually start the process of creating this. So you decide to go to the left, you make it to the end of the dark, narrow hallway, and you see a rope in the dim light. So this group did a very nice job of using those descriptive words to paint a picture for us. Your heart starts to beat fast and you wonder what will happen if you pull the rope. Do you? So do we pull the rope or do we turn back around and exit the pyramid? So let's say we pull the rope. Let's be adventurous. You decide to pull the rope. So you can, again, you see how the story kind of unfolds. They may have talked in their class about what a pyramid looks like inside, or what archaeologists discovered whenever they went into a pyramid. So we're just going to click some of these to get through. So at this one, obviously, we got caught exploring the pyramid. We weren't supposed to be, so our story ends here. So then we would hit retry, and it takes us back to the beginning so we can restart that story. We'll go to an advanced example of a story. And this one was a group of 8th grade students. I remember working with them. We did this one right around Halloween. So we had kids we have to do something scary. And obviously a Choose Your Own Adventure works really well with scary stories. This particular group went really, they got deep into the weeds with their story. You can see that they left me a little note. They were still fixing some little things. They didn't want me to do anything or to send it off and use it for anything until they were done. This has been about a year and a half ago, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that they are done. But you can see they really spent time picking the right slides, the backgrounds for their story. It does a really nice job of kind of setting the stage. So this one is called The Trip to College. And again, I'm just going to go through and randomly click instead of reading this to you, but they have their story starting with some dialogue, which is nice. We'll go ahead and choose to walk around in the woods. We decide to search for someone in the woods. Looks like we lose our keys and we're having to find a big house, or we find a big house where it looks kind of spooky. Do we go into the and knock on the door? We're going to click yes. Oh, we have to run. So let's go ahead and run. That's a good choice. So again, you can see how it keeps going through a story. Again, this group really took time to develop the story itself. So I did have a group whenever we worked on this, and I'll scroll down so you can see the length of some of their slides. They really got involved in this. But I did have a group that took this to the next level and embedded some jump scares into their Google slideshow. So they had a really calm story. You think everything's going well. You think you make it out of the woods. One of their choices was, get back in your car. And when you click get back in your car, they had like a loud noise and like this scary thing pop up on their screen. So they really took it to the next level and surprised not only myself, but the class with some of the cool things that they added to their slideshow to make it more engaging. So some alternate uses besides just writing and doing creative stories are listed here. So this is something that I actually did with my staff around Christmas time. I was doing tech tips of the week and sending out Google slideshows with some different tips in it. And right before Christmas, as things got really crazy and busy, I thought I'm not going to be able to keep up with this. So I just did one, and this is the 12 days of tech tips and resources. So I'll present that and you can see how I used the same technique to do something other than a choose your own adventure story. So I have my template slide. I put my title slide, start now. And basically what I did for this was I took a calendar and I put the dates before Christmas break, and the teachers were able to go on each day. They reopened their Google slideshow that I sent out, click on the date, and then it had just a little fun tech tip for them for that day. And then on the left-hand side, instead of linking back to restart the schedule or the story, it's linked back to that calendar. So after they got here and they got their tip, they would go back to the calendar. Next day they would come back, or some teachers, they couldn't wait till the next day and they just clicked through all of them. But again, another fun tech tip, and then back to calendar right before Christmas. So just a Merry Christmas message. So again, just a different way to use the same technique. So instead of slides having links on different pages, I put the hyperlinks on one page and it takes you to a different slide throughout the slideshow. And the last example that I'll show you before we actually get in and start learning is an interactive diagram. And this is the one that I've heard of being used. I've not actually done it in class myself. This one was for a frog dissection. So again, using the same technique, just in a different way. So this one had, again, it could be a formative assessment, it could be summative assessment, but instead of having to write everything down that you know, allowing kids to show what they know a different way. So this is just a stock photo that I found of a frog diagram dissection. And then I put over top of the tongue a text box that I covered in a white background so that I covered up what was already there. And then you would click on it and it would show some different information about the tongue. Again, instead of back to the beginning of the story, we'd want to go back to that main diagram so people could click on other choices. So they could have a diagram of the frog's tongue, some information about frogs' tongues. But this is a really good way for kids to show what they know. It could be a group work or it could be independent. So I'll stop there. Does anyone have any questions about the examples or different ways that they saw Google Slides being used for the Choose Your Own Adventure so far?
We don't have anything in the chat, but if anybody wants to unmute, they can and ask.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on how to actually do this. I'm going to show you, but if you want to have another tab open with a Google slideshow open in it, I'll give you just a second to go ahead and get one open. I did start one that we can walk through together, and we'll create that adventure on as we go. But if you want to do one on your own and not just sit and watch, you're welcome to start over on a new tab for a Google slideshow. One more thing to show you on the resources I skipped over, but if you're not familiar with some of the Google Slides templates that are available, definitely look into those. My personal favorite is Slides Mania, and it really does offer a ton of things for teachers, and it's free. I have given some donations to help keep it free, but right now everything that she has posted right now is free. But there are some amazing templates, really engaging certificates. There's like morning messages, but these are really nice. And this is actually where I got my Christmas one from, where they do all of the beautiful graphic work and your content kind of, you create your own content. But there's a ton of different templates here. I just wanted to share that resource. Excuse me, because it is a really good one. Okay, so I'm going to go down on my resource to the sample CYOA, not just CYA, Choose Your Own Adventure. Give that a second to load. Okay, so the first thing that you'll want to do with your students, and most kiddos are pretty familiar with Google Slides at this point, but there are definitely some things that if you're doing this as an activity with your kids and not just doing it for something for yourself to share with your kids, I always focus on the content first. Kids can spend 45 years making Google Slides pretty and changing fonts and changing colors, and this is bigger and that is thicker and that is, they can go forever doing just the fun stuff. Make sure that you spend time focusing on the importance of the content on the slides. So if they're writing a story, you could find 1,000 different turkey pictures. Please work on your story first and then make it look pretty with the pictures later. So aside from your title slide, I really don't focus too much on what it looks like through the story. But kids, obviously, if they get done, are going to want to do that. So I started with a title slide, excuse me, and then I added just a few different slides. Nothing's really on them yet, but you'll see why it's important to have a few to work with here right off the get-go. So we're going to write together. Hopefully you guys will unmute and speak up or put something in the chat that Shelly can share. But we're going to write a quick summer vacation. I think we're all due for a summer vacation. And if you look very closely, my people on the raft out there are not wearing masks. So that's a plus. So we're going to write a quick summer vacation story, show you how to use the technique of hyperlinking within your Google slideshow in order to create the Choose Your Own Adventure. So title slide is first. Starting with slide number 2, this is where your other slides will start linking to. So you want to be certain that things are labeled so that they can be identified later. Everything with hyperlinks goes to either a slide number or a slide title. So your slide title is what goes up here in this top box. I have intro paragraph here just to remind you that students need to hook their readers. It's not just, you start typing and everything's great. They need to have some brainstorming ahead of time, maybe some storyboarding ahead of time, so that they can really get their story down. Google Slides is not a word processor. It's not the best place to do the brainstorming and to do the writing of the story, but it's definitely a place for them to create some fun with their story. Whether they start it in Google Docs and then copy and paste each paragraph or each story in, or each section of story into Google Slides, it's definitely not meant to start the writing process in Google Slides. I think you'll end up with a lot of issues if you do it that way. So our intro paragraph would be the beginning of our story. And I don't know if you can see down at the bottom my speaker notes. This is the slide that you will link back to at the end of at the end of your chain of story events. This will be the one that you go back to for restarting. So if you want to restart the story, you could go back to this one. So on this one, I'm going to go ahead and start an introduction paragraph. You are ending your 25th year of teaching. Some of us may be there and feel the pain of this particular school year. It's been a crazy year and you are ready for vacation. Do you? Okay, so we started our story. Obviously, this is going to be very short, sweet, and to the point so that we can get through it and you're not just sitting here watching me type. But you start your story, start your developing of your characters, kind of get the gist of what the story is going to be about. We're going to get right into choices so I can show you how to do those. So after you get your introduction or your beginning of your paragraph done, what I recommend is making your text box just fit your text. If it's way down here, you're going to end up having text boxes on top of text boxes, and that gets a little bit crazy when you have, especially when you have multiple students working on things. But it's always better to shrink up your text box so it fits your text pretty close around the edges there. Then for your choices, you're going to create a new text box. It doesn't mean that your text box is actually going to end up here, but this is where I'm going to put it. So do you choose to go to Hawaii? Then I'm going to do another text box for my other choice. Choose to go to a lake cabin. Again, I'm going to shrink up my text boxes right around that. Okay, so these are my two choices that I'm going to give my reader. Are we going to choose to go to Hawaii or are we going to choose to go to a lake cabin? As soon as my two choices are created, we need to create the slides that go with that choice. For example, choose to go to Hawaii. I need to go down here to one of my blank slides and up in the title, reiterate what that choice is. You chose to vacation in Hawaii. Okay, go back to my slide that had my choice on it. Choose my other one, lake cabin. So I'm going to go to another empty slide, go up to my title. You chose to vacation in a cabin by the lake. Okay, and then I'll go back up to my my choice slide. So now that we've created a new slide for each of our choices, we can create hyperlinks to those slides. You have to create the slide first, otherwise you'll have nothing to link to. And that's a big step or a big, it's one of the things that students forget to do often. They get their choices made and they want to hyperlink immediately. You have to have something to link to, so you have to create your slides first. So now I'm going to go ahead and drag over this choice. I'm going to highlight all of it. And I'm going to insert a hyperlink. You can do that by right-clicking and using the shortcut to hyperlink, but I'm going to use the little insert link shortcut up here in the toolbar. Again, making sure that it's highlighted. And this is where I would typically copy and paste a link to a website or a document. But this time, instead of pasting that, we're going to click slides in this presentation. This is going to be what allows us to link to other slides. Okay, and you'll notice when I clicked on that, there's some slides that appear. I don't recognize next slide or previous slide or first slide, but I do see, if I keep scrolling down, you choose to vacation in, and if I just hover over it, you'll see that it says in Hawaii. That's the one that I want to link to for this choice. And then I hit apply. Now this is a hyperlink that will jump me immediately to that slide. I'll do the same thing for choose my lake cabin. Again, you have to make sure that you highlight the entire thing first. You'll go up to your toolbar, insert link, slides in this presentation. I'm going to scroll down till I see the slide that I'm looking for. You choose to vacation in a cabin by the lake and hit apply. Now my two choices are links to those slides. I can move my text boxes around. I don't like how this looks, how it's sitting up here. So I can always grab that text box, move it wherever I want it. Now, one thing that we did run into when we were doing the slides, and right now I'm on a smaller Chromebook, so my screen's a little bit smaller, but you may have kids say, my option isn't there, my choice isn't there. I go to insert a hyperlink and I don't see the one that I want. Basically what that is the bottom of the screen is cutting off what you need to see. So when that happened, I literally just had them grab their text box and move it way up to the top. So then it allows more space underneath that. I hope that makes sense. It allows more space underneath for that kind of scrolling menu to appear. Excuse me. Because once they have that hyperlink set, they can move that text box wherever they want. Okay, so we have our two choices. Now, if you have this operating as a group activity, this is a good place. So your kids work together for that introduction paragraph, but this is where you can really split off, and you could have student A do everything after choose to go to Hawaii. You could have student B do everything from choose to go to a lake cabin. If they work really well together, you can have them do them together. But if you're doing this as a group activity, this is a good place to split those kids off. Any questions about that first step?
We're doing good in the chat.
Awesome. Okay, so we have our two choices. Again, we have blank slides for each of those choices, and you'll see the text boxes underneath. So let's start with Hawaii. We choose to go to Hawaii. So your plane, we go ahead and continue our story. Your plane lands in Hawaii and you meet your travel host. She is wearing a beautiful lei and offers you to wear one too. You notice it has an odd smell. So we can choose, do we put on the odd smelling lei or do we not put on the odd smelling lei? So again, I'm going to shrink my text box up so that I have all of this space and I'm not layering text boxes on top of text boxes on top of text boxes. Let's go ahead and make two choices. You can choose more than two choices. You could choose three, but remember, every time you add a choice, there's a whole system of choices that come with that. So some of them can be very short, sweet, and I put on the bad smelling lei. I have a reaction and I end up in the hospital on my first day of Hawaii. So that's the end of your story. You're done. We all had those stories when we were younger, reading the Choose Your Own Adventure, where we choose the wrong choice the first time, and then we just flip back and go to the next page. But let's go ahead and say you wear the odd smelling lei. That will be my first choice. So we choose to wear it, or I'm going to insert another text box. You don't want to put these in the same text box. You want to make sure that those are separate. You decline your host's odd smelling play. Okay, again, I'm going to shrink that text box down. Remember, as soon as you have your two choices, you need to make slides to go with them. So I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to need to insert a new slide because I didn't have enough. So you might want to create a few blank ones. And again, my title needs to be what the choice was. So this one will be you choose to wear the odd smelling lei. Okay, then I'm going to go back. My other choice was decline wearing it. So I'll go to a new slide. You decline your host's lei. Okay, then again, you've got story to continue to create. But don't forget that we have a different choice. We also have, we didn't go to Hawaii. We have going to a lake cabin. So we would have to develop the story from that perspective as well. So that would be slide number 4. Okay, so we didn't choose Hawaii. We chose to go to a lake. So you can see how the story develops, and creating those hyperlinks really takes you in 2 completely different paths. And what you do on those paths is completely up to you. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to open up that sample slideshow, or if you're going to do it in mine and want to add to my slideshow, let me make sure I have that you guys can edit. I think I have view only, so let me change that real quick. There we go. So if you are in my slideshow and you would like to choose one of the things that we've started and add to that, or if you created your own and would like to work on creating that hyperlink and figuring out how to link to other slides in your own slideshow, give you guys just a couple minutes to mess around. That way, if you have a question or need reminded on how to do something, I can help you there. And then we'll go to some of the ending some of the end slides, so you know how to get back into your beginning slide. Hiking trails, are we choosing to hike to the lake? Are we choosing to maybe hike up the mountain? So you can see how the story can really develop and evolve. It can be a very suspenseful story. It can be a funny story. I always told my kids there's a difference between silly and absurd. Certain things just don't make sense in a story. Certain things do. But what we're going to do, I'm going to put 2 different choices, make the slide, but we're going to have a story ending incident if we hike to the lake. So let me put in my slides here and I'll show you how to link back to the beginning. One thing when you're doing this with students, you will absolutely want them to stop every probably 2 slides and go into present mode and test their links, because it's really confusing if they do their entire thing and never test things to fix links to the right spot. It's much easier to verify that those links are going where you want them to go as you create them. So to do that, you'll go up to your present. You'll go back up to your slide with the choices. So I'll go to slide number 2. I'll click on present. So I'm back in present mode. And you'll want to make sure if I click Hawaii, that the slide that comes up is my Hawaii slide, that it's the right slide. Because again, once you get going and you've got 45 slides on the left-hand side to scroll through, it really does get quite confusing to try to fix where the mistake was. So I'm going to go down to my cabin by the lake. I have, choose to hike to the lake. Here we go. And I will link to those. So again, to make those hyperlinks, I click on the text box. You have to make sure that you highlight the text first because we want the whole text to be our hyperlink. If you forget to do that, what will end up happening is your link, all of the goobly garbly stuff will show up in the middle of your text, and you don't want that. So highlight your text, go up to your insert link, slides in this presentation. Now you can kind of see what I was talking about here. So you can see the bottom of my menu is actually cut off by the speaker notes. So if that happens, you can drag your text box to the top of the screen if your choices don't show up. So I'm going to click on slides in this presentation. I'm going to, whoops, scroll down to the one that says you choose to hike to the lake. There it is, and apply. Okay. So now I have built into my story that I'm choosing to hike to the lake. And this is going to be where I'm going to end this branch of the story. So we choose to hike to the lake. This is not going to be a great ending for us. And I told the kids too, it doesn't always have to be something disastrous. It just ends your story. It doesn't have to be, you know, you die or you fall into a cavern or something like that. It's just where your story is ending. So you choose to hike to the lake. You know, the lake is beautiful. Maybe we choose to sleep under the stars at the lake. Let's go ahead and have something not so disastrous. You make it to the lake right at sunset and decide to sleep under the stars. When you wake in the morning, you will head back to the cabin. Enjoy your vacation. Okay, so the end of the story, and the kids like to do the end. It makes them feel, I think, accomplished that they've finished something. So we're going to go ahead and put the end text box. It doesn't have to link to anything. And then down below, I'm going to create another text box. To restart our vacation. Again, I'm going to create a hyperlink to the slides in my slideshow. So I'm going to drag over the text, make sure it's highlighted. Go up to my hyperlink tool in the toolbar, slides in this presentation. And remember how important those titles are on each slide. Slide number 2 is where we actually want to go back to. We don't want to go to the title slide. We want to go back to the beginning of the story. So that's going to be slide number 2. Apply. And now whenever we go to present mode, if this is where my story took me, I can restart my vacation by clicking here, and it's back to the beginning of the story where I choose at the very beginning. You'll only want that option on your ending slides. So at the end of where your path takes you, that's where you'll want those restart slides or hyperlinks. Okay. So any questions about how this whole process works as far as creating hyperlinks within your story so that you go to where you want to go? Most important thing is titling those slides in the title box that reiterates the choice that they made. So you are, you choose to go to Hawaii, you choose to go to a lake cabin. It reiterates that, that choice, and making sure that you check your links often. Super important on both of those fronts. Once you get your story done, and you want to make sure that every choice has an ending, want to make sure every choice has an ending. Once you have that part done, you can go, the kids can go in and they can make it pretty. They can put clip art or put a photo for a background. You can add your videos, whatever. But you want to make sure that your content, which should be the focus of the activity, speaks for, really shows what they know first and what they're able to do. I will say that because this doesn't look like a traditional story, grammar and punctuation was something I struggled with, reminding the kids it still counts. So just because it's not in a Word document and the paragraphs aren't in a typical text format, doesn't mean that you're not still responsible for spelling words correctly and using proper punctuation and indenting your paragraphs and that kind of stuff. So really make sure that you're still focused on quality writing, not just pretty pictures and cool fonts.
Kara, we have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Are there any pre-writing templates that allow the students to plan the various storyline before creating the Google slide presentation?
So in the resource document, the Google lesson plan, I'll be honest, my students didn't love the templates that they provided. We ended up kind of just talking about things and storyboarding and doing some like main idea webs and things like that. But let me see if I can find the document here real quick.
And Melissa, I mean, I did this years ago when I was still in the classroom. We won't say how many years that was, but back then I used Post-it notes. I know that sounds silly, but I gave them not the legal size paper, but the next size bigger than that. And they had Post-it notes, and they kind of build a tree with the Post-it notes. So they weren't writing a ton of stuff on them, but then they had their direction of where they wanted to go, and they were able to move them around and so forth. And, they could draw their lines and things like that. So it was a different way to do the pre-writing. It wasn't technology based, but it helped them and allowed them to rearrange things.
I would say you could probably do a lot of storyboarding on whiteboards. First time you do this through, it's kind of nice to do it whole group so that kids get a feel for how it works. I'm looking for that template in here, and I don't know if it's in the appendix. They have suggested prompts in there. Oh, here's a picture of what it looked like, the brainstorming doc. So basically what they just did is they had three columns, one for setting, one for characters, and one for problems. So they just put down random settings, random characters, random problems that could happen. And they kind of tried to link what makes sense. So the setting was a rainforest, a vacationer in the rainforest. There was an adventure in the rainforest. So they kind of looked for things that made sense, that fit together. But again, my kids weren't crazy about that limited type of template. So we ended up just using story maps and some basic graphic organizers to help organize their thoughts. There is a rubric in the lesson plan though, which was kind of nice to be able to have that.
Any other questions?
Thanks for clarifying that, you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
I can just imagine my students getting bogged down in possibilities and like not moving forward with the plan. So
yeah, and I'll be honest, what I ended up having to put a limit on your path can't go more than 5, because for every one, there's at least 2 more choices that come from that. And so it really does get very, very big, very quick. So your first one, maybe they only have after the first 2, they only go 3 more, and then it's over. Because with every one, you have 2 more choices. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind.
And I know, again, when I did this project years ago, I was with high school at that time, but I collaborated with the elementary teachers. And there was a day that I was able to take the high school students over to the elementary, and they were able to go into the classroom with the kids and actually go through the stories with the kids. So I think that gave them purpose as well to make it a meaningful story, and kind of they spent time on it because they knew that other kids were going to be seeing this. So it was kind of a cool project for them.
Yeah, I feel very strongly there should always be an authentic audience besides just your teacher. There's a complete different sense of pride and ownership and the amount of effort that goes into something when they know it's truly going to be shared with an audience. I mean, if you're talking, you know, the diagrams, if you're doing the diagram example of this, and you know, you're doing a dissection, going into a science classroom, or this is your science fair project or something like that, having that authentic audience puts an entire new level of engagement with your students.
We are at our 5-minute mark.
Okay.
I included the
While you're working on this, you know, I put my email address in there, please. I work all summer, so feel free to send me a message. I'm happy to get back with you. I did put some tips at the bottom of the resource document. Again, you just have to remember that this is like a domino effect. If you knock over one domino, all of those other ones fall over. So the more students that are working together on a Google slideshow, the more choices there's going to be, the more paths. You know, they can kind of converge and come back together and then split back off based on the choices, but all of those are going to need to end. So at some point, you might need to draw the line and say, all right, this is good, let's move on.
Well, thank you, Kara, for taking your time and sharing all of your knowledge with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming, everyone. And you know, again, anytime you need anything with this, or with, you know, if you have a question about anything else, I'm always just an email away.